difficult. So should you rotate the firms every 5 years, or should you rotate partners every 5 years? So I think, you know, mandatory rotation of audit firms is maybe not always the best thing. So that's something that maybe could be looked at. Also, non-audit fees. So if you have audit firms who are doing tax and advisory services, then they don't necessarily want to do much on the audit. You know, they don't care about the audit because they're making so much money from other functions. So should auditors also be doing other services as well as auditing? And what communication is there between audit committees? Well, in Colombia, not much because they don't exist. But what communication is there between auditors and management and the board about the controls? And what roles should they play? Who should they report to? Now, I want to come on now finally to ethics. Ethics is key, and you're already ahead of the game on your ethics because you already have, fundamental to your corporate governance, you have these sort of corporate social responsibility goals. Now, yet another publication that I was involved with is this publication on ethics, again from the Institute of Chartered Accountants, and this really tells you about, you know, what is ethical, what is not ethical. And what we found is that bad practices creep up on you. So year one, something small happens and you say, oh, that's okay, I'll do it. And year two, something else happens, it might be a bit bigger, and you say, well, I let it go last year, I'll let it go again this year. And then 5 years down the road, it's still the same issue, but now it's a much bigger issue. And yet, for 4 years, you've allowed it to go on grounds of, oh, it's not very big. Suddenly, it is big. So should you, in the first place, have said no? You know, you can't just say, oh, well, oh, it doesn't matter, because it might matter sometime down the road. So these things creep up on you. They're not big things like that. They creep up on you, and they might affect you sometime down the road. And we've just produced a report by someone called David Molyneux, which gives you cases which you can take back to your companies and debate within your companies about how to actually, you know, they're cases of where you have a dilemma. What do you do? How do you resolve that dilemma? So these are very, very practical cases based on real, actual live situations where people have had to make a decision, and they are not easy, I can assure you. Now, this is about civics. So when we're thinking about ethics, at what stage do we instill ethics? Should ethics be instilled with us when we're young, or is it something we learn once we become someone, you know, in the profession and in business? So if you're young and you've always grown up with ethical attitudes, then, you know, you'll always make the right decision. So, you know, I think even primary schools should start introducing things like civics and ethics and doing the right thing. And do our children do the right thing? I don't know. Culture of an organisation is set by the tone at the top. So the president and the board set the tone of the organisation. If they are ethical people, then everyone working within that organisation will be ethical. If we think of Enron, well, everyone at Enron wasn't ethical, and that's because the people on the top layer of Enron weren't ethical. So go and work for a company, or set up your company, or go back to your own company and just look at how ethical the people at the top are, because that's going to cascade down to all levels of the organisation. So what is, to conclude, what are the implications here? Well, governments must be reactive, must be proactive, not reactive. You must develop political stability. So, for instance, in Venezuela and Bolivia, they're currently doing nationalizing companies. So, you know, is that good for the growth of the economy? Who knows? But Barack Obama has now been elected president of the US. We might think we could be here in a year's time and find that the world stage is very, very different from today. But it's an unknown at the moment. Prohibit insider trading, strengthen enforcement, protect minority interests. Maybe you need to think about judges who can bring cases very, very quickly so things can get resolved. And we saw that in the first session. What about better disclosure? Openness and transparency is key. Openness and transparency is probably the most important thing for business and for good corporate governance. Maybe adopt international financial reporting standards. Even the US are now going to adopt them. So, you know, if the world now is going to be on the same regime, and for outside investors, international investors, to invest in countries that don't have an accepted financial reporting regime, then, you know, people might stop investing in those countries. Pay attention to cash. It's not any other numbers you want to create. How much money do you actually have in the bank, and how much are you going to have in the bank, you know, in a week's time? Require true independence of directors and have independent directors on boards. Abolish alternative and shadow directors. Mandate that independent directors meet alone. You should have some independent directors and they should have meetings without any other executive management there to debate things that they might not want to debate in front of executive management. And also, what about the big pension funds who are big investors in this area? What are their governance structures like? One of my PhD students is looking at the governance in pension funds in the UK, and that's very interesting. So, financial crisis may not be as bad for you here, and in fact, I think you could turn it to your advantage. Great opportunity for you, but to do that, you must take corporate governance seriously, else I don't think you will be able to achieve what you really can achieve. Okay. How late was I? Or was I 10 minutes late?
Agradecemos a la profesora Christine Liar por este amplio resumen que nos hizo de la crisis financiera que estamos viviendo en este momento desde que estalló la burbuja hipotecaria en los Estados Unidos a mediados del año anterior, que ha tenido serias consecuencias que hemos visto con la quiebra de importantes bancos y el rescate de la aseguradora más grande del mundo como ha sido AIG, y pues los retos y el momento que debemos repensar el gobierno corporativo, y más en este momento aquí en América Latina, como una gran oportunidad para salir adelante juntos en esta crisis. Vamos a continuar, estamos ya un poco cortos de tiempo lastimosamente, vamos a tener a las dos próximas personas, nuestros invitados internacionales, unos 20 minutos para cada uno, y continúa entonces la conferencia Retos de Gobernabilidad de las Empresas en Tiempos de Crisis Internacional a cargo del doctor Patricio Peña. Él es el doctor en Jurisprudencia de la Universidad Católica de Ecuador y el actual presidente del directorio de la Bolsa de Valores de Quito y presidente de la Federación Iberoamericana de Bolsas, y también es miembro activo de la Junta de Árbitros para la Solución de Disputas de Inversiones de las Naciones Unidas. Los dejo entonces con el señor Patricio Peña.
Muchas gracias. Después de una presentación tan comprensiva como la de Cristina, es difícil abordar temas que llamen la atención. En todo caso, voy a hacer el mejor esfuerzo por cumplir el tiempo que me han restringido en esta ocasión.